Welcome to the Spinner Rack, the Marvel New Universe Comics podcast. New Universe was an independent, self-contained comics book universe or publishing line imprint from Marvel Comics that started in 1986 with 8 new titles. It was the first all-new shared universe built from scratch, although the idea was used again later. And we're your guides to the new universe.
Right, so we'll talk a little bit about ourselves, and then we'll talk a little about the new universe, and then give a guide to the 8 different issues. So I'm Andy, one of your podcast co-hosts. I'm a PhD chemist and a teacher currently, comic book reader since at some point my father decided to take me to a comic book store, and I picked up some issues of G.I. Joe because I liked the cartoon. Actually met Stephen in chemistry grad school, and do you remember when it was that we figured out that we were both comic book readers?
I don't.
I don't remember either.
At some point in our long journey, we started going to the local store on Friday afternoons.
No, Wednesday, right? New comic book day.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, so made a usual Wednesday trek around lunchtime to Emerald City Comic Store in Eugene.
Yeah, just off campus in Eugene, Oregon.
Buying comics probably in the Infinite Crisis, Civil War sort of era of Marvel and DC, as far as things go.
That's about how I remember it. Yeah.
That sounds about right. But yeah, I think we were the only 2 comic lovers in the era, and at some point, that was one of the things I look forward to the most about going to the lab, was Wednesdays when I could leave the lab. Also, there's some pretty good lunch options along the way.
Those were good. That soup stand, I always liked the soup and sandwich options they had at I think Mark's.
And so
perhaps I digress.
Yeah, so my introduction to the new universe was in fact from Stephen. So I did not know it existed. I don't remember if I had ever really much seen or read any of the books, but right around the beginning of the pandemic, when everything was shut down, I was desperate to go get some comics, and Stephen suggested checking out New Universe, maybe Starbrand or DP7 as some of his favorites. And I couldn't get to the store, but I convinced my wife to let me go on eBay, and I bought complete runs of Starbrand and DP7, and that was my intro. And I think I actually quit reading DP7 the first time. I made it pretty far in until it started getting into some of these big world-changing events that I won't spoil, and I kind of lost interest. We're going to go all the way this time and read every single book, and I've been enjoying it so far.
Excellent. So I'm Stephen. I'm also a chemist, as we said, and I read a good number of the New Universe issues right off the rack when they came out. I remember starting with Night Mask #1 and the excitement of, ooh, here's a new universe to check out. I dumped many of them later during a move, and then had to go back and buy them back several years after that. The curiosity of seeing what did go on in the whole self-contained new universe became a bit of a collecting passion for a bit. And the whole new universe line of comics fits about into one short box.
Right. If you don't bag and board everything.
You do not. So our plan in this podcast is that we are starting with the books as they were released, reading 2 a week, going through and talking about them and our responses as readers. We will also incorporate discussions about larger observations, like recent ones about the world building behind the new universe, or some standout characters we found in the first few issues. And we're not going to look ahead as much as possible to give sort of a naive reader response that you would get in the late 1980s. But being in 2022, as we record this, we will be talking a lot about the world around the new universe, the late 80s pop culture milieu. And where we get it, we'll talk about the Marvel inside scoop and what was going on behind the scenes, where we can find information on this.
Right. I still dream of trying to get Jim Shooter on as a guest host.
If this podcast gets interviews with the original creators, we'll be pretty psyched with ourselves, I bet.
Seems unlikely, but hey, you never know. So what is the new universe, right? So the idea was the new universe was to be less fantastic, right? Less powerful heroes, more realistic. Real-time progression was part of the plan, so the titles would all sort of start around the same date and progress roughly at the same time. And that all starts with the White Event, right? So prior to White Event, do you recall what the date of the White Event was? August?
July 22, 1986.
Right, so July 1986. Then the world of the new universe was our world, right? So it has this White Event, although each title is a little bit variable as to how it interacted or whether they reference or how important the White Event was.
Right. Some of them are, it absolutely starts with the White Event, and some of them never referred to it, and they still haven't met any paranormals in their sort of corner of the world. Yeah, we should say that the people who gain superpowers from the White Event are called paranormals.
Right. That's not superheroes, and that's very intentional.
Yes.
Right.
So let's see. A couple of taglines. The new universe was promoted heavily in Marvel Comics in 1986 before it came out. So a couple of taglines. Beyond the edge of your imagination begins a new universe.
Man, I'm having a hard time imagining it because it's beyond the edge of my imagination.
And new heroes, new legends, new universe.
Nice. Definitely those. Right. So the titles chronicle the lives and adventures. And so again, this is from Marvel, right? The chronicle the lives and adventures of the most amazing, intriguing, powerful beings in the universe. This is the world outside your window. Their adventures are spectacular, startling, dramatic, and yet real and true to life. The new universe is like nothing else ever done or attempted. For 2.5 decades, Marvel Comics has brought the fantastic to life. Now we are bringing life to the fantastic. You can't have any more catchphrases than that. Or can we?
Give me a paragraph here. Here's a quote from Jim Shooter. During the summer of 1986, Archie Goodwin, Tom DeFalco, a number of other people at Marvel Comics, and I, Jim Shooter, created the new universe. Or more correctly, we simply decided to put to use a universe hitherto unused in comics, our own, the one we live in. Real pipes, real people, real bathrooms, no people, no repulsors, no unstable molecules. In fact, no fantasy or fantastic elements at all, except for the very few we introduce. Carefully. Does it make sense? You bet. As much as the universe outside your window does. A universe where time passes and things change and, well, you live in it. Startling.
Ooh. I like it.
Jim Shooter, Universe News, October of 86.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of pieces, and the one that I read a lot, maybe because it was in the first bullpen bulletin, is I think he had a real problem with like when the Fantastic Four's building would like lift off out of New York, and there was like a flat, like no foundation, no pipes, like it just came up right out, no problem, no big deal, and left a little flat square in New York City.
Yeah, he this was part of an essay, and it's the new universe was part of Marvel's 25th anniversary celebration. So that's part of it. And he's referring back to, yeah, Fantastic Four #1. But Jim Shooter also had experience. He was a young man who wrote Legion of Superheroes for DC. And so he was sort of contrasting these even previous generation of, you know, 50s, 60s Superman, Batman weren't very realistic at all. Marvel introduced realism,
Hold on a
greater
second.
realism.
I'm gonna pause.
So Jim Shooter had experience at Marvel, but also before that at DC, writing Legion of Superheroes. And so by 86, he was already an experienced hand at this. And he made a point that earlier superheroes were even less realistic, and that in 1961, the Fantastic Four brought a new level of realism that was mostly like interpersonal relationships, and but that there was still a greater level of realism that comics could achieve, and that they might find interesting stories out of. So we will go into the pitch line for each new universe title now, which were in the Marvel bullpen bulletins and a couple other sources at the time. And they describe the new titles that'll come out soon as in enticing ways, and we'll give you our comments on what we agree or as we go along.
All right. You want to do comments immediately after the information? Cool.
Yeah.
So Starbrand. Right? And of course, these are in order of release as well. So Starbrand. There is a weapon in the universe more powerful than all others. It is called the Starbrand. There is no more coveted, feared, loved, or hated thing in existence. Now this dreaded thing has fallen into the hands of Kenneth Connell, an Earthman. Another man might crumble under the burden. The Starbrand brings its bearer pain, worry, suspicion, fear that will be wrested away into the wrong hands. Worse, fear that it is in the wrong hands. Another man might live only to pass the dreaded thing on, to find another, but Kenneth Connell is a man like no other. Which is a little intense sounding.
Yeah, it sounds a little more intense than the book.
Yeah, it sounds like he's ready to become like Green Lantern, Superman, like amazing. He's like he's the only person in the whole universe that can handle this power and responsibility. Though really the comic's a little more of like an everyman comic, right? So he's dealing with things. At least I get it in my read as a somewhat normal person would.
Yeah, there's talk about how much this is written by Jim Shooter in its early issues and created by him and John Romita Jr. And it's sometimes we wonder if it's autobiographical because it's about a young everyman who grew up in Pittsburgh, like Shooter did. A lot of it really focuses on the relationships between him and his friends and his many romantic partners or potential partners. And it's a little more realistic than even Marvel comics were giving at the time. More, I don't know, PG-13 than PG.
Yeah, I would agree.
But its art and story has been very strong, and it's just, I would say, deservedly sort of a flagship title for the universe.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll segue into Spitfire and the Troubleshooters. She cares about what's right, not what the rules say. She's Jenny Swenson, a highly respected full professor of applied engineering at MIT, though nobody calls her ma'am or professor or anything too dignified. Her daddy called her Spitfire before he died, or was murdered.
Ooh.
Jenny suspects that her scientist father was killed by his employer Fritz Kratzy after he learned how they intended to use his revolutionary discoveries in cybernetics and before he could destroy his work. With the aid of 5 outstanding MIT, or the Toot, students, she steals her father's entire lab, including his technological masterpiece, the MAX, Man Amplified Experiment. Spitfire and her computer hacking comrades, the troubleshooters, are ready to risk their careers, their freedom, even their lives for justice. And if it's fun along the way, well, so much the better.
As we mentioned outside of the podcast, this is clearly the longest of the introductions.
They really.
Hey, when you're talking about the Toot, you just keep going, right? It's hard to stop. The Toot is the place to be.
Yeah. So Spitfire is, Jenny Swenson, this engineering professor who's, I don't know, she's half a fugitive and half carrying on a vendetta against this guy who she blames for her father's death. She blames correctly, but there's
hey, no spoilers.
Sorry. There's an evil sort of conspiracy in the world behind some of the things she's observed. And the impression we had going in that it would be like real genius with more sort of shenanigans and hijinks from the computer kids or the computer hacking comrades, the troubleshooters, it's been more, I don't know, action, I think, with her and her fight against these nefarious characters.
Yeah, that's very much true. It's a little more focused on Jenny, and she's the title character, and a little less, and her arc, I guess, more so than the students and the fun along the way to some degree. But yeah, it's our second book. After Spitfire is Psi-4. It's a nice short one this time. One is a psychic healer. One can project his astral self. One is a telepath. One is a telekinetic. One can use psionic powers to explode things. Oh yeah. Divided, they're vulnerable to exploitation by individuals, by organizations, by governments. United, they can mind meld and create a single being who possesses all of their paranormal abilities. United, they're invincible. So yeah, it's a paranormal team that's not really a team, right? So our Psi-Force group, at least early on, because we haven't read ahead too far, we're looking at a bunch of kids trying to get by, trying to survive. It's not a bunch of kids trying to, correct injustices or fight bad guys. It is a much more realistic, grounded, take on a bunch of kids who didn't really know each other, except, kind of forced together, and they have these powers. So we have not seen them united yet. So
No, they. It's very much a teen book. They're high school student age, and we early on described it as the Breakfast Club meets, I don't know, New Mutants, X-Men, which is a good place to start. The characters are coming together, and they're very distinct. And so far, we're having fun with that. Night Mask. He's Keith Remsen. She's his sister, Teddy. Together, they run a unique psychoanalytical consulting service. With Teddy's help, Keith can enter the dreams of others, roam the labyrinths of their mind, and in the process, help the seriously disturbed. Keith remains anonymous in their clients' dreams, however, protected from their psychological defenses by a psychophysically manifested camouflage. It's called the Night Mask. Night Mask is a lot like a movie called Dreamscape, if you've ever seen that. It's about a person who can enter the dreams of others, as they say. He and his sister are both high school to college age, So they're not like professional psychologists themselves, but they have the story background gives them a chance to sort of go into people's minds, have a lot of dream imagery, and sort of search through clues to try to puzzle out what's really bothering the patients. So it's a sort of very self-contained book so far.
So I know there's definitely some Night Mask crossovers.
So looking forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one thing to get into the mind of troubled people, but to get into the mind of other paranormals and dig around should be an interesting step.
Yeah, one would imagine. So next we have Mark Hazard Merc. Combat. It is what he does best. He's Mark Hazard, a Vietnam veteran who has gone on to become a soldier of fortune, selling his fighting abilities to military causes he believes in, or at least can live with. It has cost him, though. Cost him his wife, his son, the love of his parents. The other Mercs are Mark's only family now, but what choice does he have? Combat is what Mark Hazard does best. Right, so this is actually pretty spot on. I made the comment in a podcast at some point, so although it cost him his wife and his son, that's only through divorce and alienation. His wife and son are okay and actually do show up in the book and are a fun part of it as well. So the book is really all about his life, but it's not only an action book. It does have a lot about him just trying to get by and get through his life in probably the best way possible. From what we've read so far, it's been one of my favorites. But that's Mark Hazard Merc.
It's combat is what he does best. It's a good sort of half war book, and then his job or his career does bring conflict home to him. So he's had some interesting encounters on American soil as well as overseas. And in terms of action and personality, it really adds up well as a sort of 80s action hero. Is kind of unusual.
Yeah, I imagine if you were doing like a movie trailer, it'd be like Mark Hazard. He can handle anything the world throws at him. Guns, knives, rebels, terrorists, assassins. But can he handle his son? Right. So yeah.
It's it could work well as a comedy as well, but it's played pretty straight. So.
It is, yeah. But he's good at combat, good at dealing with high pressure situations. But some of that is kind of figuring out how to take those skills in the real world and not get arrested.
Yeah, and this is without superpowers, I should say.
Correct.
On the other hand, Kickers Inc. Jack Magniconti, the highest paid professional athlete in the world, perhaps the most gifted physical specimen ever to wear a football uniform, has a problem. Yesterday, suddenly, by means he can't understand, he became much stronger, much faster than before. It cost him the life of his brother. It will change his life forever. And that's just the beginning.
Bum, bum.
Bum, bum. Yeah, this is an interesting, it's a little lighter than most of the other titles.
Sort of.
It's either that or aimed at a younger audience. It's a group of professional football players sort of in their off season forming a charity of last resort for people. So when people have problems they don't know how to solve or who to come to, they can call Kickers Inc.
If the A team is too busy.
And so, they're a very public group. They have uniforms that they don't wear all the time. It's definitely the most Jack Kirby inspired title I may have ever seen. You can kind of imagine it.
I don't think we've figured this one out yet. From what's out there now, from what we've read through the podcast, it's an interesting book for sure. It's not NFL Super Pro, right? It's not like a football related, garbage comic.
Yeah.
It is fairly interesting. Sorry, NFL Super Pro. You were a really bad book.
This is not the NFL Super Pro podcast.
We'll do that one next. I would probably, yeah. There's only so much you can make fun of. Anyway, next up is Justice. Justice with a V. He was a warrior, a law officer in his own world. He has the awesome power to destroy, to shield, to protect, and to read the true nature of a man by his aura. Now, how he came to this place he cannot remember, but this he knows. The good must be protected, and the evil must be exterminated. He is justice. Right, so it's a good fish out of water kind of story. He's a little atypical as not a normal person living in 1986 that became a paranormal through the White Event. It's more a warrior transported to our world somehow during the White Event, and has to kind of learn how to survive and interact while meeting out justice, right? Mark Hazard Merc and Justice are our two comics where we keep a kill count because they tend to do a lot of murking people.
The absolutely the rule in most superhero universes of absolutely never kill anyone is widely ignored in the new universe. In those particular two books, at least. Justice is a very interesting character. He's the sort of over the top Death Wish meets Terminator in some ways, but he's also a very sort of innocent and moral judge who's always trying to figure out what he's doing here and how he can get home. So he's a sympathetic character, even if it's a little bloody at times.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last one is DP7. And DP stands for Displaced Paranormals. There's 7 of them. They are strange. They are horrifying. They are constantly ridiculed. They are 7 people out of place in the world. 7 people afraid of what they are, afraid of what might become of them. 7 of the most dangerous beings ever to walk the face of the earth. So
these, that's a little off.
Yeah, I mean, they're not constantly ridiculed because these are people who developed powers from the White Event, probably, and went to a clinic that was interested in helping them, quote unquote. And once they thought that they were in danger there, they escaped and have been on the run the last couple of issues.
Spoiling the book, man.
I'm sorry. They're the closest thing to the X-Men probably in the new universe.
So again, like the X-Men were kind of a team, usually with some sort of purpose, right? They were out there to protect mutants or, to train people to survive in the world, where DP7, again, is just a bunch of people who happen to come together and are trying to get by, right? And it's interesting. It sounds like a Seinfeld episode or something, like, there's no plot or something, but in fact, the trying to get by is generally very well done in the new universe, because it's a pretty new concept for comics, especially at the time. Just kind of, how do you deal with powers, right? Because the whole world at this point in the new universe does not know about people with paranormal abilities, and you can imagine how well that would go over, right? So it's a lot of
Yeah, I was going
what
to
do you
say
do? Where do you turn, right? Who do we got to help us? Nobody.
nobody. Yeah, I was going to say the horrifying. I mean, it's not like they're um, most of them aren't visibly paranormal, but like there's some of them did get like kicked out of their homes basically because their family was disgusted by whatever was happening with them. So yeah, it's a um, it's not so much like yeah, learning about your powers as sort of trying to survive because your powers have made you an outsider. It's written by Mark Gruenwald and drawn by Paul Ryan. This is the most consistent art team and writing team, I think, on any New Universe title. And generally, it's been very well done.
Yeah, 32 issues in an annual, right?
They made it to the end. So those are the pitches and our thoughts on them for the New Universe titles as they came out. And I'm sorry, I may have spoiled a couple of things, but so far, Andy and I have just finished the issue number 3s. So there's still plenty of time for you to join us on our journey through the New Universe. We would recommend that people haunt the back issue bins, the quarter bins for these. It should be pretty easy to find, particularly the first year of printing. There was also, I found a lot of times stores would have for the series that lasted a year, they'd have, here's all 12 of this series for $10 or something, which is a pretty good deal. And then there was a couple of trade paperbacks that have come out 5 or 10 years ago. Comixology still has 2 collections of Star Brand, one of Cyforce, one of Nightmask, and I think one of DP7. But we will try to refrain from spoiling or overanalyzing the future. And as I said, we'll look at the sort of information that came out that was available at the time from Marvel Checklist or Marvel Age magazine, but we're not going to look to the end too often with these things. So you can also email us in the meantime at newuniversepodcast@gmail.com. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, keep on the lookout. We're likely to do some little promotions and maybe some giveaways. We have a website you can find through RSS, which publishes our podcast. Lots of places to do grand New Universe things. It's also sort of conveniently set up that if you just want to follow one title or 2, you can, because each issue or each episode will have, say, Star Brand and Star Brand number 1 and Spitfire number 1, and then a month or so later, just like the comic book had come out, Star Brand number 2 and Spitfire number 2. So, though I definitely recommend
to replicate the 1986 experience,
right? It's been a good experience, and I think you'll find, although there is negativity around the New Universe. If you kind of go into it with an open mind, like I have, it's all pretty good, right? It's all enjoyable, and it's got a lot of fun 80s pop culture callbacks too, which add a little extra bonus. So yeah, we hope you come and join us and listen to us ramble on about comics for a good long time.
Awesome.
All right. Well, see you back next time at the Spinner Rack. Go check out our stuff and yeah, enjoy.
Enjoy.